Speaking of China, I mean, what do you think is the greatest misconception people have about investing in that country?
I think there's a few commonly told myths about China, and one is that it's a command economy, and particularly with the President Xi's reforms, people are characterising this as China, trying to control the economy. But if you really look at what they're doing, is they're really putting in place very fundamental reforms around how the economy works. So even though they might have an industrial policy that is encouraging electric vehicles, the companies that are making the batteries, all the cars, these are basically private enterprises operating in a market environment. You don't get to have the success that China has had over the last 30 odd years through a centrally controlled mechanism. That just doesn't work. So yes, the government's very active in policy making and in reform, but I think most Western countries would prefer that their governments were just as active.
And what about, I guess, transparency of financial reporting of companies in that country?
The issue of financial reporting for China is a significant one, but it's not an insurmountable one. Particularly when we are investing in some of the larger companies there, and you don't get to go from being a startup firm to being a very large business over 20 odd years without having extraordinarily strong controls and processes in place. You have to remember, most of these companies, the really successful ones, started as private companies, and the owners certainly do care what happens. So generally there are good processes in place. You look to make sure that they have a reliable auditor. And while we've made many bad investment decisions over 30 years investing in this part of the world, we can only ever really identify one where we were fooled by fraudulent activity or in the accounts. So it's not to say the accounting standards are as good as the rest of the world, but they're good enough and reliable enough to be able to operate with a good level of confidence.
One of the issues that perhaps has been thought about with investing in China has been that the Australian economy has generally had a pretty strong linkage, at least historically, with the commodity side of things and the trade that goes on there. How much diversification benefit does investing in that country provide for an Australian investor?
I think more and more it's quite significant. If you went back 10 years ago, a big part of the Chinese growth story was very heavy investment dominated by the commodities which we supply to them. But today you have a very fast growing service and consumer economy. So I think it is quite different now.